If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Censorship.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikolov and Darnell Samuels.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk, bro.
Bill C-10?
Yeah, man. It's only a matter of time before, my content's not Canadian enough for it to be promoted as Canadian.
That's why you gotta fight the power.
Yes, sir.
Right? We gotta fight the power, right? So today we are talking about Bill C-10 and the limiting of freedom online. So we'll be looking at freedom of speech online. So Bill C-10 and does Canadian content need saving, and will more Canadian content make us a better country? So those are kind of the underlining themes we're going to hit in this conversation. But first things first. Papa freaks all the honeys, dummies, Playboy bunnies, those wanting monies. We're gonna have to talk about our YouTube channel before we jump into this, because it transitions into this conversation. This affects us. Now, our YouTube channel I'll be honest. I don't know if Joel wants to be honest. I'll be honest. We've neglected our YouTube channel. Actually, here's a joke. I didn't even know we had one. For a very long time. I didn't even know we had a YouTube channel until I can't remember. I found it by accident. just because when we started, my whole mindset was on doing podcasts, audio, right? Mm-hmm. Doing it through the audio. And so now everybody's telling me like you need to start doing it through video as well, and getting on YouTube and getting on that tip. So what we did during the break is we started to resurrect blow the spirit of life into our YouTube page in the name of Jesus. That's what we did. So basically what we did was what we're doing. We're not video yet. We're working towards that one day. But what we wanted to do with the YouTube page was create playlists and create snippets from the show. And then eventually create these playlists of these themes that we constantly hit on the show. So for example, there's a playlist that is about Indigenous issues. There is a playlist on economics and theology of romance. There's a playlist on histography. There's a playlist on economics. And there's a playlist on critical race theory. Now, of course, you guys already know those things are going to grow. We're 114, 115 episodes deep. So it's just a matter of going back through our catalog and then basically curating these Sixth Sense Report list playlists, or you can almost say curriculums. You can almost say curriculums on these specific issues. So please look out for that. Subscribe, check it out.
Yeah, and shout out to the team or intern that we got helping us with that. Mm-hmm, definitely gotta give respect to the work that's being done there. Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. So we're working hard to make our YouTube page more usable, more user friendly. Again, we have a lot of cool stuff on it that you won't necessarily get on our Sixth Sense Report page, just because YouTube makes it a little bit easier to post snippets. So we have some stuff on the Indian Act and property rights, relationship welfare, why marriage is a business, love in marriage, and then why is economics called the dismal science, right? And then the Abraham Kendi issues as well. We talked about Abraham Kendi.
And if you are, a avid YouTuber, you can also listen to the podcast. Obviously still image, but not video podcast, but the podcast episodes will be publishing there as well. Which those have been there for a while, but
they've been there for a while. Yeah, they've been there for a while. Yeah, yeah. We also had a snippets on from, like I said, the Abraham Kendi episode, the problem with Abraham Kendi's definition of anti-racism, where Abraham Kendi fails as a historian, and anti-racism economics is pro-slavery economics. And so subscribe.
Yeah, and I hope these shorter segments of our previous episodes will be maybe something the audience can share with others. That's a little bit more palatable to somebody to be like, hey, I want you to check out what these guys have to say about something particular. So hopefully those will be ways for the listener to introduce friends, family, others to our content. If you see something you like, word of mouth at this point is really the best promotion, especially with
and in the future it'll be the only promotion.
Yeah, when we're on our blockchain website and black market broadcasting, all that stuff.
Got to go underground, man. All right, so guys, again, please subscribe, like the video, click the bell, leave a comment. Let's start to expand and build platform online.
And on that note, if you like our episodes, you like what we're talking about, rate us, give us a rating. If you like us, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or whatever your podcast catcher is. Like our episodes, share them. Whatever if you like what we do, help us build our audience. That'd be great.
Help a brother out.
Yeah. So when did you find out about Bill C-10? Like, what did it shock you? What like, how did that come about for you getting exposure to it?
When we had to do an episode on it. I don't, my policy, and I tell this to everybody, man, my policy is that I don't, if anybody follows me online, like, my thing is, like, I don't engage with not social issue. I don't really deal with controversy. I don't engage with controversy until it comes to my doorstep. Like, that's just my policy. Like usually I'm like watching NBA highlights. I'm doing push-ups, pull-ups, skipping, eating, watching cartoons, doing homework, washing dishes. Like, there's no time for mix up and controversy. So when it comes to my doorstep, then I'll tackle it then. When I mean by doorstep, I mean, like, once it affects me personally, then I gotta pull my guns out, and then we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah. So what made you talk about this then?
So it was scary, actually. Bill C-10 was scary when I really looked into it, and I was like, okay, this is not good. This is serious. Now it's time for me. Like I just finished saying, I was not paying attention. Now I'm like, okay, I need to pay attention now.
Yeah.
So, how about you?
Yeah, I think I've been following it really for a while, because I would say there's very strange things, not just with the bill. Like, I have criticisms of the bill, but there's been things in this bill that have just constantly evolved in ways that are like, this is so sketchy. And for anyone who's really paying attention, Bill C-36 as a follow-up sort of confirms a lot of, to some extent, maybe the worst fears with Bill C-10. The biggest thing for me that I think stood out, that was sort of controversy around it, was the original bill had excluded user-generated content, so that would mean, like, my Facebook page, your Facebook page, would not qualify under this regulation. And so for the listener, Bill C-10 is basically giving the CRTC the legislative power or the responsibility to regulate Canadian content. And without getting too much into it, there's so many aspects to this that just say, like, to me, speak like, what we don't even really understand what this bill does, because it's so vague and so broad that it really depends on the benevolence of your your leaders as to how it will be used.
Yeah, I think if we can capture the heart of it, so you guys could walk away with something, uh, I'd say that they claim, and actually, I'm taking this from Sam Say's article on Bill C-10, and it says they claim Bill C-10 is merely designed to establish a level playing field between streaming platforms like Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, and YouTube, and of course traditional broadcasters. The bill suggests it's not fair for traditional media to comply with Canadian regulations when streaming platforms do not. And so the idea is that there's regulations, of course, obviously, for Canadians, but the U.S. don't have to deal with those regulations, so they get an advantage in the competition between them, the American media outlets, and Canadian one, because the Canadian ones are regulated. So if Bill C-10 passes, streaming platforms will receive a special tax, and they would be forced to produce, broadcast, and promote Canadian content to make supposedly Canadian content more discoverable for consumers. So essentially, what the bill is trying to do is trying to get rid of the competition, which is American, and try to level the playing field by promoting more Canadian content. Now, I think this is what's shocking to me, Joel. When I did my research, I had to put this in my notes, and so Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault, he said in a CTV News interview, he said this about the bill: "This law should apply to people who are broadcasters who act like this law should apply to people who are broadcasters or who act like broadcasters. So if you have a YouTube channel with millions of viewers and your revenue is high, then at some point the CRTC, which is the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, so the CRTC will be asked to put a threshold on the money that you're making from YouTube. But we're talking about broadcasters here. We're not talking about everyday citizens posting stuff on their YouTube channels."
So those are the words that someone has said describing the bill. The criticism of the bill would be the bill does not make those statements clear that those statements hold true. That's why I said it, the criticism is that it depends on the benevolence of the dictator as to how it's enforced. Because what do you think is Canadian content? Is not what we do Canadian content?
Yes, it is, actually.
It doesn't qualify.
What are you talking about, man? Success makes change, baby.
Yeah, no. They're required to promote 50% Canadian content, but of course,
so it's good for us, no?
No, we won't qualify because we're not Canadian in terms of the content that they want to promote as Canadian. So again, this is the problem. It's so vague that it becomes at the will of the person in control of the power. And this is where, my position on the CRTC is the entire thing should be abolished and destroyed. The CRTC is the reason why Canadians pay the most amount of money for cell phone and internet bills in North America.
Really?
We have a monopoly that is enforced, or it's an oligopoly that is enforced by the CRTC.
Sorry, what's an oligopoly?
Oligopoly is essentially a small group. So monopoly is single company, and oligopoly is like a handful of companies. Rogers, Bell, TELUS. We have an oligopoly in telecom. And the reason for it is the CRTC. They are the gatekeeper to the industry. If you were to abolish the CRTC and some other changes, what I won't get into, Canadians would be actually able to enter into a free market. But guess what? When you buy your TV package, that means you wouldn't be required to have a basic package that included 50% Canadian channels that you don't watch.
No YTV?
Oh, you might watch YTV, so you'd
Yeah,
be
yeah,
willing to pay
I like
for it,
YTV. Yeah.
right? I'm not saying all of those channels won't exist, but essentially, Canadian tax dollars are subsidizing Canadian content that not enough Canadians want to watch,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mhm.
it's the CRTC to blame.
Yeah, good point. I think, I guess, from the theological side, like as Christians, like this bill C-10 doesn't come out of nowhere. Like it
Mhm.
still has, it almost has, it mirrors the bill C-6, where the bill that criminalizes biblical teachings on homosexuality. And so, right, so these things are
I mean,
consistent.
potentially, this could be used to say any pastor's sermon that speaks about homosexuality in a sinful manner is
Mhm.
pulled off of the internet.
Mhm. I think one of the things that kind of fascinated me from looking at this was, so the heritage minister, Stephen Gilbo, I was just, it kind of threw me. I was like, heritage minister. I'm like, that's a job. I was like, that's a thing. And so I had to look it up. And so for some of you guys are listening, like, wait, what heritage minister? I don't know I never heard of that before. It sounds interesting. But so the heritage minister, the minister of Canadian heritage, is the minister of the crown who heads Canadian heritage and the department of the government of Canada responsible for culture, media, sports, and the arts. And I thought it was fascinating that the minister of heritage, who's responsible for the culture, media, sports, and the arts, is not connected with the culture of media. Like the fact that they're working against it, fascinates me. But it's your job to be a part of the culture and promote the culture. But it seems like he's working against that. And especially like the first part where he says, like, for YouTube channels, and that's why we opened up with the YouTube, because we're like, well, for those of you who have YouTube channels and you start to bring money in, then we'll tax that. And then even then, promoting good Canadian shows and not promoting certain Canadian shows. Um, yeah, it's kind of scary, to yeah, that we would have the government actually working against our little startup show. Like, even think about it. Like he said, what was it?
At some point.
Journalists. I think it was he said, for those people who are broadcasters,
Mhm.
like, oh, not regular people. But I'm like, well, that line is blurred now because of mics and and podcast platforms. That whole line is blurred between
Mhm.
the broadcaster and a regular citizen, right? Because a guy who goes to Ryerson for journalism, graduates, goes to work at the Star for 5 years, and then says, you know what, forget this, I'm gonna do my own thing. Kind of like the Brandon Gonis show. And he used to be on CP24. Now he's doing his own thing independently. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, he's a
Well,
broadcaster on YouTube that's getting a lot of followers and so forth. So you're really looking at, us trying to think about, well, what's the line between a broadcaster and a person and a
and
citizen?
wha- whatever makes you big enough that you're the competition for mainstream media,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the line.
Right.
They want to regulate the competition because if if COVID's taught you anything, the government is all about controlling the narrative, right? And they can't control the narrative. Or they're losing mainstream media, whether that's CBC, which is basically government broadcasting, and CTV or all the other those media entities for the last 50 years, 100 years have had so much influence on the culture and the narrative, what's talked about, what's not talked about, and let's just say the internet in general, but YouTube and things like that, podcasts, are removing that influence and power. This is about returning power away from the market, away
Mhm.
from the free market, away from Joe Schmo who says, I'm going to plug in a microphone to my computer and start recording. Now,
I think
I was gonna say,
Sorry, go ahead.
obviously, if you're too small, they don't waste their time, because if everybody who put up a 10-minute rant onto their YouTube page was regulated, well, then you'd have everybody standing up against this bill. But what they essentially marginalize just enough people that not enough people are complaining.
I think the heart of the issue that the minister, the heritage minister is getting at, Mr. Gilbo, is that uh, we need saving. So the idea of our media needs saving, and not necessarily from bad content, like, right, okay, like, yeah, there might be hateful content. That's one side of the coin, but then the main argument that they're the main narrative they're promoting in the public is that we need more uh, Canadian promotion. And so Trudeau's minister says the internet censorship bill will make Canadians safer. My job is to ensure the safety and security of the Canadian population. And so,
And that's from
do you think it's
the post-millennial article, I think.
the post millennial.
And I'll have that.
Yeah. So what do you think, Joel, in regards to like the reach of Canadian content? Not necessarily censorship, but just the promotion of Canadian content to
Well,
save it.
I think I mean, I go back to my point. I think it's just cloaked speech is what, like, I don't, I think he's this, I mean, I think this guy is exceptionally slimy. I don't trust a word that comes out of his mouth.
Oh man, come on, Joel, man. Give the guy show a little grace, man.
Man, the guy has not done anything. Like, if you, like, and that's the thing, is like, that's actually what's made me most concerned about Bill C-10, is every time he opens his mouth to talk about it, he's squirming, and if he gets a really tough question, he's basically trying to give an answer that will not have a follow-up question, that will sort of make it go away, but doesn't really say anything. Like, he's not answering tough questions. When he's asked what qualifies as Canadian content, just a bunch of word salad comes out of his mouth that doesn't mean anything. Because this bill, again, if you look at Bill C-36 as the follow-up bill, Bill C-36 is talking about charging people like $20,000 for first offense, $50,000 for a second offense for hate speech online. And so we have sorry, I'll go back to your question, but I'll talk about the C-36 a little bit more. I think, to be honest, it's not about saving Canadian content. It's about saving the Liberals' view of where they want Canada to go. And so it's about shaping the Canadian content so that the culture will follow the content. And so, to me, the heritage minister should be primarily focusing on Canada's past and preserving the things of the past that are of substance. So, I mean, that's sort of what the heritage, that word sort of speaks to. And so the things like statues, take the crazy statue controversy that we've had with heads being chopped off, pulled down, all these. Wouldn't it not be wise potentially to move some of those statues in controversial places, maybe into a museum as an artifact? Like, to me, that's a heritage minister's role. How do we preserve our heritage? Maybe the things that aren't so great about our heritage, if the culture so deems. It doesn't mean we should tar and feather those statues, but maybe there's a different place. Maybe they shouldn't be in a public park. Maybe they should get moved to a museum. To me, that's the kind of content that seems to be in his purview. But the focus of our heritage minister is, in my opinion, shaping the future, not actually preserving our heritage.
Yeah, no, that's it's a good point. I think yeah, just looking into the future and seeing potentially what can be, and I think, but in the present, I think looking at how they're coming about trying to solve this problem of promoting Canadian content. And I think that, like, for us, do we need saving? Does this Canadian content need saving? I would say no. No, it doesn't. Um, it doesn't need saving. What it needs is competition. right?
Mhm.
Sam said in his article, he summed it up pretty well, and he said, Bill C-10 wouldn't advance the interests of Canadian content creators or consumers. It would advance the interests of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And so I don't see them trying to protect us, trying to protect the 6th Sense report. And I think that when you look at the CRTC, right? When you look at the CRTC and what they've already done, right? Which is they basically regulate, for those who don't know at home, they basically regulate the TV and radio, right? So when we look at the Broadcasting Act, the last time it was reformed was 1991. So essentially, what the Broadcasting Act does, it promotes Canadian content. It was created to try to overcome, U.S. media in Canada. Right. So the idea of Bill C-10 is to update our Broadcasting Act to make it more applicable to today, and trying to make our Canadian content more competitive with the Netflixes and the Spotifys and the YouTube. And they would do that, of course, by getting it to promote Canadians. So the CRTC, what they do right now, presently, so 35% of it regulates the Canadian airtime. So it promotes, so 35% of like radio should be promoting or is promoting Canadian music, right? So right now it's 35%. And I got these stats from JJ McCulloch's show on YouTube. And he was pointing out that, yeah, it's 35% right now. So it's not, this isn't like estimating in the future. Right now, they're promoting or they're forcing Canadian radio to promote 35% of Canadian music. Which some people might be sitting there saying, oh, that's great, but I'll get to my point. Is it more? Now, and then when it comes to TV, it's 50%. They're pushing, Canadian shows to promote 50% Canadian shows, right?
Mhm.
And that's what they're doing right now. So think about it. Once Bill C-10 does pass, and they have more influence, again, what would you suspect that would look like when they're trying to force more Canadian content? Yes, it sounds great for us as 6th Sense Report because that's part of our brand, promoting Canadian content, and that's why 6th Sense Report was created, because that was a problem. I agree with Trudeau. Too many of our peers know more about more about American life and American media and about American politics than they do their own country, which was scary. So we created the 6th Sense Report to promote Canadian values, so people are aware of what's going on in their country and not just looking over their neighbor's backyard.
What's funny, of course, though, is like, you look back to, remember when Leslyn Lewis was running for the Conservative Party? And
No, not really, but go ahead.
okay, so I think there's an article by True North that found Kamala Harris was talked about like,
oh yes,
100 or like 10 times the amount, right? So we brought that up on the show at some point. But the point I'm trying to get,
show. Candace Malcolm was on.
Yeah, Candace Malcolm. Yeah, that's right. We were talking to her about it because it was her article.
Yeah, she came on the show.
And do you think that they would regulate CBC on talking about the U.S.? No, of course not. They're not gonna go after, basically the company who they foot the bill for and basically pay them to be their propagandists, right? So this is where, at the end of the day, as much as we talk, like they puff up the purposes, these politicians are playing politics, right? Like and this is unfortunately the way politics works. It's about public perception more than it is about actually making change, right? Like if a politician has to choose between what's actually the most effective and what will get him the most praise, 9 out of 10 politicians are going to pick most praise every time.
Right. And actually, I would add to that, Joel, that like this whole Bill C-10, is all from a lobbyist group, right?
Hmm.
And so like we talked about public choice theory before, and then public choice theory is when you have a group of people, a lobbyist group, basically pandering to the government and getting what they want put in place over the majority of the people. And so, like, this whole bill is contrary to what benefits most Canadians, but because of the lobbyist group, Friends of Canada, Canada Broadcasting, that's the name of the group. Yeah, Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. And so, yeah, as a lobbyist group, they are involved in promoting Bill C-10,
And
appropriately named Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. And so this is how politics is played, guys. So please pay attention. And we mention this all the time. Yeah, a lot of these policies don't come in because everybody's asking for it, but just a few people are asking for it, and the few people with a lot of money.
well, and I would say a few people who also have a vested interest in maintaining CBC's
Yeah, of course.
place
Yeah,
of prominence, right? Friends of CBC really means friends of the propagandist.
Yo,
But anyways,
I have a question, Joel.
Sure.
Where are the Friends of Sixth Sense support, man?
hopefully they're liking, sharing the
sure.
podcast.
Yeah. So
Giving
okay,
us a
and then
review on iTunes, that stuff.
Yeah.
You can hit pause, come back, do your thing.
yeah.
So
What I was gonna say. So with in light of so for example, the whole idea of Canadian content, right? So we just talked about how does Canadian content need saving, but the implication is that Trudeau's pushing is that does Canadian content make us a better country? Would you say us having more Canadian content would help us be a better country?
I think having more content is less valuable than high quality content. So
Unpack that.
quality over quantity, right? So use Drake as an example. Drake being a Canadian who his performance is at basically the top of his class is going to inspire more Canadians than seeing a really crappy TV show that's being forced onto my TV through taxpayer dollars. Now, and then this is what I would actually say. I know what the response to me is going to be, and I think it's a very, very bad approach. So the response is the same thing they do with electric vehicles. Essentially, you're subsidizing a product that is not financially viable on its own in order to create further development and grow the industry. The problem is that you actually overproduce instead of innovating. So take take us for an example. If we received the special funding because we qualified as Canadian, would that potentially prevent us from developing further so that we actually did that on our own? Because now we have less incentive to continue developing and growing because we've made it, in quotation marks, because we've now, and people might say, oh, what are you talking? To me, the real place to spend the money is not on publishing low quality content. It's actually investing in the development of people so that they become high quality content and they blow the competition out of the water. Their approach, in my opinion, is to give these creators money via the tax dollars, via forcing them to be on TV, is what's going to grow the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say it's the same failure, in my opinion, of the electric car industry. The biggest problem with electric vehicles is the technology and batteries.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than further research, we develop products that are not yet viable. So to me, it's the same issue. And I would say government does it all over the place because all they see are revenue problems. Oh, let's solve the revenue problem, circa minimum wage, right? Oh, electric vehicles. They don't have enough revenue. Let's give them more money. Canadian content producers. Oh, they're not, they can't do it full time because they don't make enough money. Oh, let's give them more money. It fails miserably to recognize that quality and developing the quality of the content is what produces high quality content.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. That we have to. It's all about having competition, and I think that's the economic principle that I would like the listeners to take away. That competition makes things better. So competition between producers uh, lead to better products, right? Because you're always just trying to get better, right? And so, for example, um, like Joel said, he mentioned Drake, right? Drake didn't need any help. Yeah, okay, fine. He got a cosign from Lil Wayne. But other than that,
How many,
Drake, right?
How many years ago was that? Like,
Yeah, okay, right. But he could make an argument.
no, but it's
yeah,
it
okay,
was
now
a
he's just making
starting
over door.
point.
Yeah, but hold on, let me get back to my point.
Sorry.
But yeah, so Drake, right? He did his thing, and then you look at The Weeknd. He's a big deal. Bieber is a big deal. We see even in Canadian hoops, right? And for a long time, Canadian basketball was pretty weak. But now, Ontario's the GTA is a hotbed for producing some of the best talent in the NBA, and the way they overcame their American competitors, because that was Drake's competition. That's every Canadian musician's competition. That's every Canadian athlete's competition is American. But we look at what they've done, and they've overcome that by just getting better and competing against their competition.
Mhm.
Right? And so kill your competition instead of asking the government to eliminate them.
Well, and
I think, sorry, and I just wanted to ask you a question. That I'm just curious. Uh, when it comes to Canadian content, do you take in Canadian content? Do you watch Canadian TV shows, Joel?
just one. It's called the NHL.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, then you're part of the problem.
Well,
You're part of the problem.
What I mean is, like, I consider hockey a Canadian game.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I'm
And-
talking. I'm talking about like just shows,
So-
like
so-
radio shows and TV shows.
I would say, I mean, I really don't watch a lot of TV anymore. I just don't have
Mhm.
time. I mean, I basically watch sports. That's why I said, like, I watch hockey. Like, hockey is
Okay.
the one thing that I consume,
Okay.
regularly from a
Okay.
content perspective.
Okay, so to flip this on its head, I fell in love with a Canadian show.
Okay, what's that?
The show is called Anne with an E.
Okay.
Anne with an E. I know the ladies are probably like, "Oh my gosh, she watches that." Yeah, I know it's one of those Netflix nights with my wife. So Anne with an E. It's basically um about this little girl, and it takes place. She's an orphan. She gets adopted by this old couple named the Cuthberts, and basically it takes place in I think PEI. And it's an old story. It's an old storybook, an old Canadian author. It takes place in Canada. But it was just a really well done show that I actually fell in love with and I wanted more of. And I was just like, wow, I never realized that I could enjoy a Canadian show that definitely has feminine feel to it, but it was really good. So the point again is, just if you produce good content, then there's no need for government intervention. So, Joel, on this whole issue, what would you say? What's your 2 cents on it?
Well, I'll say, I think I can finish with a little bit of hope, and then I'll give my 2 cents. The little bit of hope is that, the bill is not yet passed. It's with the senators, which most people may not even realize. We have that part of our government, just because it made it through, I think it was the House of Commons. It still has to go through the Senate So yeah, it passed the House of Commons June 22nd. Now it's with the Senate. They are basically working on it, but my understanding is that they rise for the summer or some terminology like that. And if an election is called in the fall, the bill dies because it won't have passed before the election. And so what's very interesting, let's say as a counter, is that Trudeau's also being very critical of the Senate right now, which is kind of scary. He's talking about how our Senate doesn't work very well. And so the point I'm trying to bring up is that there is some other aspects to this bill that's sort of going on as well that have both optimism and pessimism, because it sort of makes me wonder, what else is he going to try to do, or what else is he going to try to fix? So my 2 cents is that this bill actually represents a lot of Trudeau and a lot of his approach. I think he is, in the simplest sense, just look at COVID. They have treated the entire Canadian population like kids. Complete paternalism, right? Telling everybody what to do rather than informing people on the risks, what to be concerned about, how to concern yourself. No, everything is legislated, tell you what to do, shut things down. It's treating everybody like children, and that nobody can make decisions for themselves. To me, that's the same thing this bill is doing. We can't allow people to see content we don't like. So we need to be able to regulate it so that the children don't get exposed to the wrong thing. I think it's cloaked in, political speak about protecting Canadians, and, the far right is rising up and we need to blah, blah, blah. I think it's just a very concerning time. And hopefully, like some of the court cases that are going on with COVID, I have a little bit of hope that maybe the senators, there's a quote from one of the senators that basically had said, our committee should hear from legal experts, persons with perspective on all sides of this issue, to determine if this bill and its provisions are actually fully compliant with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I think right now Canada is in such a crucial time with regards to our charter, because we will see if it actually has any substance to it. The other part of that that's coming to mind is the Adamson barbecue court case. Although yesterday, I shouldn't say yesterday, but they'll know now. On June 28th, he was supposed to start giving their arguments to defend his case, and the judge basically made a procedural argument that they weren't in the right jurisdiction or something, and now they have to refile some stuff. It's a complete gong show, so there's things like that sort of go in the other direction to go, well, what are we doing here with regards to the law and actually, forcing government actors to follow the ultimate law of the land, if you want to think of it that way. So yeah, I think this bill is just another sort of stone or another block that needs to be evaluated, and really is going to tell us, where's the direction of this country going, and do they actually value the concept of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But what about you? What's your 2 cents on this? What do you think what do you want to leave the audience with?
I think that this is definitely going to be a turning point in this country's history. If Bill C-10 comes to pass now, that will be a nail in the coffin of freedom for Canadians, and possibly the 6th Censorship. So fighting Bill C-10 doesn't just come by voting the voting ballot, but by liking, subscribing, sharing, and if possible, financially supporting your favorite shows. That's it. That's all I gotta say.
6 cents makes change.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.